Hi, this is Nehal Kazim, and this is the Ad Tips for Ad Pros podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs and marketers how to grow their businesses with direct response advertising. And today we have Sam Bell from PPC Boutique. What's up, Sam?
I'm doing wonderful, man. How you doing, y'all?
I'm doing awesome, man. Good to have you on. And the reason we have Sam today is because he told me about one of the campaigns that he's working on, that he was working on, where he took a live preview model, where it's usually used for offline campaigns, and took it online. And this is a model that, whether you know it or not, you might have been to a lot of these type of events, whether you're interested in real estate investment, in trading, and even now as far as Amazon and learning that in person. But Sam's going to talk about what is the live preview model and how people are making a lot of money from that. But more importantly, if this is a model that you've used in your business or can't fund this in your business anymore because of a variety of reasons where it's just too expensive, and how to take that model online, this is perfect for you, because not only is this a system that you can use nationally, so you're not doing live previews or in-person events that are very costly, you're able to scale your business a lot faster and based off of predictability and numbers that will allow you to scale your business. So excited for you to share this today, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Super excited as well. I hope everyone gets a lot of great information to go out there and start making some cash with.
Awesome. So I think a really good place to start would be if you can explain what the client was doing before you were involved and what that first round looked like in order to implement what a live preview is, and then what happened in that moment, so then we can actually understand what it took to take this online.
Sure. So this particular client was in the real estate investing niche. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the preview model, generally a preview model is a live event. And on the front end of that model, there's a lot of upfront marketing that takes place. So generally, a company will come into a certain market. So, for example, I live in Tampa, Florida. So Tampa, Orlando, they're very big markets. So they would do a blitz marketing campaign generally around 2 to 3 weeks before them actually holding the live event, which comprises of radio ads, TV ads, online ads, etc., inviting people to come to this free live workshop where they'll have the opportunity to learn the fundamentals of real estate investing or what have you. Okay.
Right.
So the objective is to get as many people to that live event as possible. Now, at that live preview event, that first event is free to attend. Now, there is where they will present the information. They'll generally share some good content to help inform people. And if for those people who do attend live, if they want to take it to the next level, then they will generally make an offer of anywhere from $300 to $1,000, where they will sell another workshop that they're going to be holding generally within a week to 2 weeks from the first preview event. Okay. So that's generally how that works. And I'm sure most people have attended some sort of free seminar somewhere in their city to attend. And that was actually a preview event. So you got a chance to preview what the opportunity was, get some information, and then make a decision if you want to invest to go to the next step.
And
now you can imagine. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is very common practice, especially in some industries, right? Like in terms of real estate, in terms of investing, like this isn't like rocket science. The same way for you and me, it's like, listen, man, you got to spend $1 to make $2. Here's what like the return looks like, and here are the processes to get there. In the same way, preview events are just kind of common sense in some types of business models in some industries.
Yeah, absolutely. They're pretty standard, actually, in a lot of industries. The real estate information marketing is just one particular business vertical, but even CPAs do this to acquire clients. Financial advisors,
Right.
they throw preview events or dinner events to have people come out. So this is a very common type of event for multiple business verticals across the board.
Right.
The challenge, as I'm sure that you probably are aware, is that it's very costly and it's a lot of overhead because even just from a logistics standpoint, you have to market these specific events, and a lot of times these events are actually held in multiple locations over multiple times. So just logistically, that takes time. Then you actually have the speaker that has to go out to the event. You have the staff that has to be on board. You have the hotel costs in addition to the marketing costs. So just to run and go into one market, depending upon how big you're looking to make the preview event, you can easily spend anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000 on the front end, and that's before you made a dime. That's just to go ahead and actually start putting people into the preview event.
And that's just a commitment, because where I grew up was Toronto, and with Toronto, we would have these like rolling events. It's the same thing with a lot of hotspots around the country, where I'm sure Florida gets hit very hard with these type of events too, where we had one almost weekly, and they would take over radio, they would take over different types of TV ads, and then obviously like social, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And so from your client standpoint, this was a model that was already working. He was just trying to improve his number before you ended up where you actually ended up. But where was the first step when you first ran the Facebook ads campaign to get the first taste of what this business model would look like for him?
Sure. So essentially, this client actually used to work with a big brand in the preview space, and he wanted to strike out on his own and kind of go down that route. And because that's the business model that he knew intimately, he had a lot of success with. There's still a lot of logistical stuff that had to happen on the backside that you really can't prepare for unless this is something you've actually been doing. So he approached me and said, "Hey, I want to do an online preview model. Can you help me get people to register for the event, for the live event?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." So he gave me a budget. I asked him, "Okay, what do we need to hit? What are the KPIs that we need to hit in order for us to create and have a profitable event?"
Right.
So he gave me a range of around $30 to $50 per registrant for the event. So essentially what we did is we actually set up a Facebook ad campaign. We spent roughly around $7,000 driving people to register for the live event. Okay. So we wound up getting around 100 something people that registered for the event.
Okay.
And from the people that actually registered, from there, you actually have to confirm all those people. So there's a whole nother step in the process, because once those people register, you want to make sure they actually show up. Okay. So they got around 30% of the people that registered to actually confirm that they're going to be attending the live event. So our average cost per registrant was around $30, and the confirmation rate was around 30%. Okay.
Wow.
So far so good. That's around around $90, and that's if everyone shows. The challenge was when the event happened, they only had about a 10% show up rate.
Wow.
So I'm sure you can see how, even though you had a certain amount of people confirm, they still had a very low show up rate. And obviously that affected the overall numbers as a whole, because they did not have a lot of people to actually make the offer to. Okay. And again, they run into the same challenges that come along with anyone else running that model. You have the marketing that you have to pay for, you have the hotel overhead you have to pay for, you have the staff that you have to cover, and the speakers you have to cover. So it was very costly, and the client didn't really see an ROI from that particular event, which kind of put him in a pickle. And he's trying to make a decision of what to do next. So I had already been running online automated webinars. So I said, well, look, we can replicate this model, and as opposed to doing the traditional offline preview event, we can actually do an online preview event.
Right.
He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the same presentation that you do for people live, we can actually take that same presentation and create a webinar and do it in an online format. The cool part is that I can guarantee you that you're going to get a lot more people to actually watch the event,
Right.
for a tenth of the cost that you would pay to actually have someone attend live. So I ran a financial model for him and showed him what the numbers would look like, and he said, okay, let's do it. So essentially what we did is we actually took the offline preview and we turned it into an online preview model, and our call to action, as opposed to selling straight from the webinar, we did an application call to action. So essentially this is what the funnel looked like We ran Facebook ads to a webinar registration page. Okay. From the webinar registration page, it was a just-in-time webinar, automated webinar. Okay.
Got it.
So basically, it ran every 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes. All right. So they would come, they would register, they would watch the webinar. Webinar is around 45 minutes to an hour long. And then from the webinar, they would actually apply to have a strategy session, with my client and his team to see if they was a good fit for their program. Okay. So essentially, here's how the numbers backed out. And these are like the base numbers that I look for in running this type of model. Okay.
Okay.
So on the high end, in terms of cost per webinar registrant, you want to be at around $10 per webinar registrant or below. Okay. From there, I'm looking for a minimum of at least a 50% show rate. So that means for everyone that registers for the event, at least half of those people should show up. So if I had 200 people register for the webinar, I should have at least 100 of those people to actually show up for the webinar. So in that particular instance, if we wanted to get 100 people live, it's going to cost us $2,000, $10 per registrant. Okay. Right. And then we actually only have a 50% show up rate, which is $20 per live attendee. All right. From there, you want to have at least a 10% conversion rate on the low end from attendees to applicants. So that means from all the people who actually attend the webinar live, at least 10% of those people should apply for a strategy session. All right. The next metric in that process is the actual show up rate. So you want to have at least around an 80% show up rate from people who actually book a strategy session to those people that actually show up on the call. Okay. And for those people who actually show up on a call, you want to have at least a 20% conversion rate from call to close. Okay.
And
so
for
if you have at
anyone,
least
yeah, and for anyone listening to this, I know like those are a lot of numbers for someone to consume if they're just listening to the audio version of this or if they're in their car or something like that. So what we'll do is make sure to create like a financial model for the people listening. And if you go to adtipsforadpros.com, there's a Facebook group, and in that Facebook group, we'll make sure to put this financial model just so you can see all these numbers for your business, and then look at how far you are from these numbers so that you can actually implement this stuff in your own type of campaigns. One thing that we kind of brushed over, Sam, like as you're explaining that, is the one element is that there's actually 3 types of registrations for that business, right? So in the offline model, there was the cost per registration that's just like name, email, cell phone. Then there's the person who's responding and connecting with the sales team and whoever the administrative team is, and then they're connecting and confirming, and that's 30%. And then from those people, there's only 10 people that confirm. So the cost per registration, especially if you're the business owner here or the person responsible for marketing, the cost per registration is $30, but the actual like cost per confirmation is $90. And then from all of those people, the number, like if only 10% of like confirmed people are showing up, that is actually $900. So what is the real number there if you're the person who's planning this out in your organization, or if you're responsible for creating these numbers in these different scenarios, the cost per registration, when someone asks you, what is that number? It depends on the type of registration. Is it just the registration? Is it the confirmed registrant? Or is it the show up? And so those are 3 very, very different numbers. And when you look at those numbers in comparison to the webinar model and online preview model, it's so different, because if you had the exact same cost per lead, which is $30, the show up rate is 50% right away. And so, or higher, which is what you've seen in the past, Sam. And with that, your cost per show up is actually, in that case, is like $60, where in the other model, it's $900. So that's like game changing for the average business owner who's doing that preview model, assuming everything else stays the exact same.
Yeah, exactly. And again, there are some huge companies that do this, and they really have their numbers dialed in. But it's amazing to me how a lot of people will actually run a marketing campaign and they haven't actually run the numbers and built out a financial model. I'm a huge advocate of having a financial model, even if you don't have any data to work off of, to at least determine what is the minimal numbers that you need to hit to at least to get to your break even point. Okay. And I think anyone, even if you're just starting out, run the numbers, see exactly what you can spend to acquire a lead, what you can spend to acquire a customer, and just kind of reverse engineer that process. And that's actually going to dictate how much of a budget you need to allocate in the first place. Because a lot of times people will launch campaigns, whether online or offline, and they'll kill the campaign before they even spent enough marketing budget to get enough data, to actually hit their base KPIs. But if you actually reverse engineer it and then come up with those base numbers are first, then you can establish a sound marketing budget and not kill your campaigns or cut them off before you had enough time to actually gather the data necessary to see if the offer is working or not.
Well, you're able to make those decisions based off of, the realities and benchmarks you've set instead of just guesses and hunches. And so for anyone who hasn't run this type of funnel before, we'll provide those numbers for you in the Facebook group just so you have them as the baseline. And then you can say, okay, my cost per lead is actually 20-30% lower than what Sam told me. Okay, perfect. But my show up rate sucks. What's going on there? And so you can reverse engineer when your business model, where is it that you're struggling or where is it that you need help? Or more importantly, what are the different parts of your business that you should not be focusing on because they're already on benchmark or are okay where there's other things that require way more attention?
Yeah, and that's a great point too. Each step of the process is a conversion point. Okay, so you want to look at each of those conversion points and establish those KPIs, and it's going to be different for everyone. And it's really going to be driven by what your actual value per customer is, or what's your average order value per customer. So like my numbers going to be very different if I'm selling $1,000 product versus if I'm selling a $5,000 product, right? Because I can actually spend a lot more money to acquire the lead, to acquire the customer.
Agreed.
Than if I have $1,000 product, then I have to hit a different set of KPIs. So it's going to be different for everyone based on what your price point is or what your product or service it is that you're selling.
And so when you started the campaign, you did the campaign anyways, locally, even though like everyone knew what those numbers are and what the challenges of that business model is. But at that point, you guys, I'm assuming, made a decision of like, okay, this is not working. There's so much of a commitment required, not only emotionally, but like financially in order to start and do a promotion. Once you start a promotion and go down the process, none of it's actually confirmed or, there's no real confirmation or probability that that's actually going to happen. It's still a hunch. It's still a guess, even though they might have ran those same type of previews in person before and had great success. Yeah. So what is that?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's so many factors that come in. I mean, you got weather that's a factor, right? If it's raining, that might impact the show up rate. Right. There's a natural disaster. There's just so many variables of things that can occur. Right. And again, assuming if you've done enough of these, you can still maybe factor some of that stuff in. But if you're a newer business, or even if you're somewhat established and you're running that model, there are all things you have to take into consideration.
And so how do you go into that transition? Because I'm sure there's people listening right now that have done these types of model or done these in-person previews, and they're like, man, if you can show me a model, like I'm all ears. So what does that transition look like from taking these in-person previews and taking them online?
Sure. So it's actually not that big of a transition. There are two main conversion points that the clients that I work with, they have to really be concerned with. Okay. And the first one is the webinar itself. The webinar needs to convert at least 10% from attendees to applicants on the low end. Okay. So we do provide them with a framework to help them put that together to make sure that they have all the necessary elements in the webinar. So that way they can increase the probability that they will hit that 10%, but that's kind of the benchmark for that. And then on the back end, the phone sales. So the person that's actually doing the strategy session calls with the prospects who are applying to work with you, that they need to be seasoned in sales. They need to really understand, the consultative close, if you will, right. So that way they can actually convert those prospects into paying clients and customers at least 20%. Which is, I mean, if you're talking to 10 people, that have went through all of these different steps and they're qualified, 20% close rate is very doable.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are kind of like the two main elements. All the other elements, those are generally the things that we focus on because we handle the front end. So when I say the front end, meaning we do like the ad creative, right? And we know that our ad creative needs to perform at a certain amount in terms of click-through rate. We do the webinar registration page, and we know, okay, the webinar registration page needs to convert at a certain amount or a cost per register in order for it to make sense. And then we also look at the data in terms of from registrations to attendees, and we know if we hit a certain metric there, then we're good to go. Okay, so all things being equal, if you're at $10 per, and again, this is based on if you have a $5,000 offer or better, okay, that these particular numbers that I'm quoting. So if you're selling a $5,000 offer or better on the back end, if you're paying $10 per registration, you get at least a 50% show rate, 10% close rate from attendees to applicant, and a 20% close rate on the back end. Like, you're winning. You're doubling your money all day. Okay.
Yeah. And what that
and obviously,
go ahead.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying what that doesn't account for is any of the back end revenue from that, right? Because everything you're talking about is people come in, they register, they show up to the webinar, they apply, they come onto a sales call, and they get closed. And that whole sales cycle is as quick as like 7 days to 14 days. And then everything else on the back end of that, whether, especially in this case where they have higher ticket tiers or additional in-person event offers, that just maximizes the overall profitability, not only of the campaign, but of the business.
Absolutely. You're 100% correct. And we hadn't even got to the back end, but you're absolutely right.
I jumped too quick.
No, that's perfect segue because you're absolutely right. That normally that first front end of $5,000 is a front end. Okay. Then there is generally a back end, some sort of mastermind, some sort of live event that people may sell anywhere between $15,000 to $25,000 for that. So you can easily build. When I say easily, it's relative, but you can quickly see how you can build a $2 to $5 million business with this model without really having a ton of overhead, without having a ton of the obligations and commitments. Because at the end of the day, in business, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. Because there's a lot of these big seminar companies, they may be doing 20, 30, $40 million in revenue. But the question is, how much of that are they actually keeping because of all the overhead, employees, logistics, et cetera. Whereas with this business model, if I have, a 70% profit margin, I'll take that all day. If I build $5 million, doing $5 million in revenue, and I get to keep 70% of that, outside of, what I got to pay in taxes, of course, but just an overhead, ad cost, things like that, commissions to my sales team, you're winning.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from your standpoint, you come into the business, it's let me drive traffic to the funnel that's already working. Let's not break anything that works. So let's start there. So you guys started there. Then after that, you launched this webinar promotion. And so you're doing same previews, but except online. And so what happened that first run around, that first time that you're taking the ad spend and you're investing it just on the online previews? Like, what happened from a lead generation standpoint, and then what happened from the actual sales standpoint? Like, how quickly were they able to get sales and or break even?
Yeah. So just to show you how night and day this is. So around the same ad budget. Okay. But because we're running through the online preview model, I think we're probably averaging around $7 to $8 per registration. Our show up rate was around 70%. From registrants to attendees. Wow. And our close rate, our application close rate was around 15 to 20%. Our cost per application was on average around $80 to $85 per applicant. Okay. And they were actually selling, they actually were selling a $25,000 package on the back end. Right. So they wound up selling like two $25,000 packages and like another $50,000 in their $5,000 to $10,000 packages. Okay. But here's the kicker, and that was within the first 30 days. Okay. So we basically launched the same type of model, but on the online version spent around $6,000 to $8,000 in ad spend, generated around around, I don't know, 80 applications, something like that, 80 to 80, 100
Mhm.
applications. And then they did $100,000 in sales. But the kicker is they did another preview event, but now this time they invited people that had gone through this funnel that either attended the webinar or at least registered. And then they did another $50,000 in back in sales when they had their live event the next month. So they wound up doing $150,000 in total sales from that preview model. And they've continued, and they have continued to run that model. So I know that like that model can work if you have those main two elements. You have a good webinar, and obviously a good offer that people want, and you can actually present that offer through the consultative close on the back end. Easily the biggest, build a 7-figure business.
And we're involved with some of these type of offers too. And we've seen, okay, first, we're not getting clicks, like, or something's going on where the clicks are too expensive. Then you start getting normal clicks, then you start getting the leads. And then once the leads start coming in, it's like, are people showing up? Then you figure that part of it out. And then once people are showing up, does our webinar suck? Like, forget about salespeople, forget about follow-up. Like, does our webinar actually convince and excite someone to say, you know what, let me give it a shot, let me complete an application? Then once they actually complete the application, do they even have the ability to show up and do it consistently? Because how good are your application versus like your connect rates to your application? And then from there, do our salespeople suck? Or if you're the salesperson, it's like, do I need to invest some time here on sharpening the saw? And at that point, then you're able to see, okay, do I even have the right offer to maximize all of the hard work that I'm doing from an advertising, marketing, and follow-up standpoint to get someone to get to that point where they've taken all of those steps to speak to me? And so from an entrepreneur or the marketer standpoint here, they're thinking, okay, how do I actually know if I'm going to be successful in this model or not? And so if they're listening to this, how do you tell them, or what would be your best approach on saying, okay, there's all of these different like friction points. Where do I start, and how do I know what to focus on to get to the point of breaking even? And then how do I actually make this profitable?
Yeah, great question. So, so everything starts with the price point of the offer, right? So, what's your offer and what's the price point? And then based on what that price point is, then we reverse engineer and break down all of the steps to see, okay, well, what is our break even point? What's the most amount of money that we can spend per registrant? What's the most amount of money we can spend per application? What's the most amount of money that we can spend to actually generate the sale and not lose any money? Okay, so those
Right.
are like our maximum worst case scenarios.
And
Okay,
for people
and
who've
then
never
from
ran
there,
those campaigns, like, you're going to give them those benchmarks. So that way they're not guessing anymore, right? So now they have those benchmarks.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when they come to us, because again, we run so many of these, like, the numbers that I gave you, regardless of the vertical, because we run this in the real estate vertical, we run
Right.
this in the coaching consulting vertical, we run this in the health and fitness vertical. And those KPIs, $10 per registrant, $50, a 50% show up rate, 10% close rate. That's going to give you an average cost of $200 per applicant. And again, these are generally $5,000 offers or better. So if you have a $5,000 offer or better, if you're at $200 per application, that's generally around the highest that you're going to really be able to pay to actually get an applicant. And then from there, if you're closing, 20% of those people that you actually get on the phone, you're pretty much going to be in profit. Like, we
Right.
know that you will make money if you hit those base KPIs. So that's kind of like the base starting point for most people. Now, if you have a lower price point, then obviously those numbers are going to change, right? Because if you're selling a $2,000 offer and it's costing you $2,000 to generate that sale, well, that's obviously your break even point. So you're going to need to increase the conversions and reduce the cost somewhere in order to get into profitability on the front end. Does that make
Awesome.
sense?
That's perfect, man. And I think from all the different elements, it doesn't sound like there's that many moving parts, right? Versus like doing these in-person previews, there's so many moving parts and there's so many like investments you have to make without that immediate like return or data or any of those decision-making elements. So at this point, it sounds like in order to launch this whole type of campaign, you need Facebook ads in terms of whether they bring on someone like you or they're doing it internally. They have to create the graphics, they have to create the copy setup. Then there's a landing page, there's a thank you page, there's like the actual show up depending on the platform that they're using, there's the application page, and depending if there's a sales page or not, an order page, right? So there's majority of those assets are required in order to start. Obviously, you know, having a follow-up sequence, having flash promotions and doing those kind of things have like a huge effect on profitability. But just to get the baseline started, it sounds like there's a lot less elements. So if someone is looking to get started on this type of model, what would be your main recommendation on getting them started so they're not stuck kind of in the planning stage? Because it's so easy. I want to make sure everything is perfect. I don't want to lose money. But in reality, there's a huge opportunity cost of not implementing. So from your standpoint, what would be a good starting point to plan this kind of stuff out and actually start executing from an entrepreneur's standpoint?
Yeah, great question. So it's basically going to boil down to a few things. The first thing is you have to have an offer, right? You got to have an offer that you have to sell, and you need to have a decent price point for that offer. The higher the price point, the better. What I've seen, a decent threshold is going to be around $3,000 to $5,000. Okay, if you're selling a high ticket item. Okay, so that's the first thing. So have your offer, and then secondly, just be clear who the offer is for. Okay, because you want to make sure when you actually go to run your Facebook ads and you're writing your ads that your market to message match is congruent, and you're targeting and going after the right people. So make sure you got a good offer. Make sure you have a clear price point. From there, the technical implementation is fairly straightforward. Essentially, we use the resources that we use is we use WordPress and Thrive Themes to actually build out the funnel and structure the funnel. For the automated webinar platform, we use Stealth Seminar for that, and we fully customize everything. And then we generally integrate it with an automation CRM. So you can use anything from, you know, Infusionsoft. I think you can use like GetResponse. You can use, you know, MailChimp. I think, and there's probably like, I don't know, 4 or 5 other integrations that work directly with Stealth, so that way you can do some of the automation and tracking. Okay. From there, the only other thing that you would really need is just some sort of online scheduling platform that integrates with your CRM, so that way you can track all your appointments, and a phone.
Then pick up the phone. That's it.
Yeah, pick up the phone, man. You got to talk to people.
And from your client standpoint, like it sounds like their specialty was that sales element. And so
Yes.
they're what, you know, from all the capabilities and the experience that he has, he's just like trapped. He's like, dude, like get me leads so I can close and do what I'm best at.
Exactly. And in my experience, you know, that's really what works best. You know, if the client brings the sales experience, they know their product, they know their market well enough, you know, and I tell all my clients, you know, traffic and leads is the easy part. You know, traffic is really never a problem. And I know it may sound funny to hear that, you know, but the reality is, you know, traffic is never an issue. It's always going to boil down to the offer itself. Because if you have a great offer, you know, not only can you get traffic, you can get free traffic. People will actually beg to promote your offer if they know that the offer converts well enough. Okay.
Right.
So it all really starts with the offer and understanding your market and making sure that it resonates and is congruence. If you have a good offer, then the traffic stuff, we can test, we can optimize, and we can get that dialed in.
Perfect. So here's like my biggest takeaway from this whole conversation, which is that if you're doing any kind of business model right now, the first thing is, what are your real numbers to define the success of a campaign, and how well do you know them? And I think the biggest example of this was the type of registration. It's like there's an online registration, there's a confirmed registration, and then there's the actual show up. And each one of those numbers are so different and have such a big impact on your business as you optimize. And so then from that standpoint, how do you actually try a different business model, even though it is the exact same? There's nuances that are different, where the overall cost per show up or cost per person who's receiving the offer is so much less, and is so much and done in such a scalable way that it reduces a lot of stress and financial investment upfront. And then at that point, once you have that, in order to like actually get this campaign launched, the main things that you're talking about is like, here's the financial model that we look at because we've done this so much. If you're missing these benchmarks, here's why it's not successful. This is not some kind of mystery. These are the main KPIs, like key performance indicators in your business. Do you know them well enough in order to make decisions on where to invest your time, money, and energy? And so from my standpoint, it makes a lot of sense of like how like scientific you guys have brought it at this point. If someone wants to move forward with you or wants to reach out to implement this in their own business, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can head over to ppcboutique.com. That's P as in Paul, P as in Paul, C as in cat, boutique.com. And we have a online schedule there. Or you can just reach out to me on my personal site, sambell.us. SAMBELL.us. And you can actually schedule and book an appointment there. And there's a lot of good information on there as well for you to read, as well as some testimonials from different clients and things like that that we've worked with over the years.
Awesome. And we'll make sure for all the numbers that Sam mentioned in terms of like the financial model, we'll make sure to create that Excel and collaborate with Sam just to get it into the group. So if you're not already part of the Facebook group, it's adtipsforadpros.com, and you'll get invited into the group from there. And you'll just have to request the financial model and you'll get that. And that will be the fundamentals of like your map to your campaign if you're in this space, and know exactly where is it that you need to work on and what that you need, what part of your business that you need to optimize. So again, Sam, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Nihal. Thanks for having me, man. And everyone out there, I know we covered a lot of information really quickly, but I always like to tell people implement. It's great to get information. It's great to get knowledge. Take action on knowledge so that way you can actually get real results.
There you go. Boom. Thanks, bro.
All right, man. Take it easy.